Thank you for coming for a workshop that we organized to talk about the rule of law, or rather the challenges and the major problems when it comes to the rule of law in Turkey. We have a wonderful guest from Germany, originally from Turkey, Professor of Law, Hussein. He's going to be talking about, various aspects of the problems that we see in the rule of law, or rather lack of the rule of law in Turkey. And he's going to talk about that from different angles. We can expand on some of the issues that he touched in the Q&A session later on. He has a great credentials. He worked in the universities as an academic. He has a degree in both master's and a PhD from the UK, United Kingdom. He came back to Turkey, worked in the university, worked in the bureaucracy, in the government of Erdogan government, in the Ministry of Youth and Sports. He actually coordinated a very important project when it comes to the youth education in Turkey. Perhaps most or some of them or all of them suspended now. Is not working perhaps. And he also he's one of the victims of almost 140,000 government employees, be it judge, prosecutor, academic at the universities, a doctor in the publicly funded and run hospitals, or even veterinarian, all the other different professions. 140,000 of them, they were dismissed overnight from their jobs with no effective administrative investigation, no judicial investigation at all. And they didn't have any chance to challenge their cases. Nobody asked him or any others in this 140,000 people to explain if they done anything wrong, to contest the evidence, if any. We don't see any evidence when we look at the cases actually. When it ended up in the court, most of the time is Twitter messages. If they subscribe a critical newspaper, like my newspaper, I used to work before the government seized and they shut down Zaman newspaper. If you're a subscriber to that daily, which is the largest, one time the largest national daily in Turkey, with 1.2 million copies, then you are accused of being affiliated, being associated, came in contact with a very broad definition of the terrorism just because you're reading a critical newspaper. That goes, of course, with other media outlets as well, magazines, if you're watching the TV critical of the government, again, they may be listed as a criminal charge and the terror evidence against you in these sham cases we see in the Turkish courts. Perhaps just a quick note, then I'll give the floor to you. Yesterday I was watching the press briefing between American President Donald Trump and the visiting Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Trump, of course, we know what's going on in the States with all the press freedom challenges and other issues. It looks very much familiar with us. We're down on that path before. We didn't think Turkey will be ending up in this position, 6, 7, 9 years ago. It started very incrementally, very gradually, but it became very fast, very quick. Now we are in this position. And many of my colleagues, journalists, colleagues, or academics, other professions, had to move out of Turkey if they get a chance to live in exile. In this joint press briefing, Trump was thanking President Erdogan for releasing an academic, a Turkish-American academic, called Serkan Gölge. He used to work for the NASA. He's a great scientist, great job in NASA, and he just, was in Turkey at the time when the failed coup happened. He was vacationing with the family in the southeastern part of Turkey. And he got caught with all this, witch hunt cases. Police found a $1 note, in his pocket, in his wallet, and that $1 listed as a criminal evidence, as a terror evidence against him, and he was sentenced, I think, seven years in jail. He was eventually released pending the appeal as such, but he was still in Turkey. Anyway, the Trump was thanking a head of the government from Turkey for securing his release. That also shows, very symbolic, but it also shows how the legal cases in Turkey actually decided by the political authorities, not the legal experts, not the judges, not the prosecutors. All of them are in the pockets of Erdogan government or his associates, partners. They decide on the court cases based on the political signals they get from the government, not because of the evidence they have in front of them. So it is very symbolic, but that's just want to mention from the yesterday's press briefing I managed. So with that, I'll hand the floor to a great professor of law. He's going to talk about the rule of law and other aspects of the legal challenges that we see in Turkey.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the SCF for inviting me here. I hope this will be beneficial to all of us. Well, Mr. Bozkurt has just mentioned about me. As I always say, my study subject was constitutional law and human rights. Now I am the subject of human rights. So that's transformation of Turkey, short story of transformation of Turkey, because I was a brilliant, well, as they say, was a brilliant bureaucrat and academic. Then one day I woke up and I realized that I was a terrorist. And I had to leave my country, and I had to live away from my family for 3 years. Luckily, after 3 years, I have managed to unite my family in Berlin, apart from my eldest son, who was arrested because of me and put in detention for 5 days. Then he was released, but still he can't be able to leave the country because there is a ban on him. And he has nothing to do with anything at all. He's just a student in a Bilkent University, one of the top universities in Turkey. And they didn't ask him anything about himself. They asked him about myself, where am I and what am I doing, etc. So that's give us a small clue about law in Turkey. Although Turkish constitution says that Turkey is a democratic country governed by the rule of law, but as we all know that papers say something, but the practice in the real life is a different thing. Therefore, I'd like to mention about these things, and also maybe before that, I'd like to say, as Mr. Bozkurt stated, that I worked in Erdogan's government. Yes, I did, because I used to believe that his government was an example for Islamic world. How can a Muslim world become a democratic country and embrace the universal values? And all Europe and the intellectuals supported him, as well as myself, because we thought that he's in the path of democracy. Then after, when we realized he wasn't, he was just cheating on us, it was too late for us. Then, since I live in Germany, that reminds me the German history as well. Because as you well know, that Hitler came to power by election with the support of the German people, and then he started going the direction of authoritarianism and then dictatorship, and most of people didn't realize it, as now Turkish people don't realize where they are going. And Hitler was selling, I would say, imaginations to the German people, saying that Germany will be a great power as it used to before. Now Erdogan does the same, because he's selling imagination, he's selling some kind of mystic stories to Turkish people, saying that once we were in a great Ottoman Empire, and now Erdogan is a great leader of the Muslim nations, and then Turkey will become a powerful country, or Turkey has become already a powerful country. Even Germany, England, France are jealous of Turkey because it's too powerful, and this lie had customers. Maybe half of the population believe it. Why? Because of the mass media. And there is not even a single independent media in Turkey. Therefore, these lies are easy to be bought. And these all connected to each other. Why I'm talking about this? Because when we talk about the rule of law, the rule of law comes with the democracy and the human rights. So if there is no rule of law in a country, there can't be democracy or respect for human rights, as it happens in Turkey now. As you may well know, Erdogan's government got caught red-handed with a corruption file, 2013, 17 and 25 December corruption operations. After that, he needed an enemy just to make this corruption disappear. So he blamed the Gülen movement, saying that this is a coup attempt to government, to overthrow the government or Erdogan, while there was solid evidence about these corruptions. His four ministers and their sons, on this famous Iranian young person, Reza Zarraf, who is now in the United States in prison because he was charged and imprisoned in the United States. And he started demonizing these people who are in the movement. But there was a problem for Erdogan, because at that time there was still less or more a law in Turkey. So when even he confessed as saying that after the coup attempt, we needed this. This is a grace of God, because I wanted to eradicate or eliminate this movement, but the law was a hindrance for me. So when this coup attempt happened, and he declared the emergency, rule of emergency, then he had all the power. This is very interesting, because I think everyone should know that it was a funny coup attempt anyway, because there was three coups before this one, and in Turkey, everybody, even my mother, he's illiterate person, she was making jokes about this, because she knew three coups before, the way it happens, the way it was coordinated, that was a joke. And it was obvious that it was orchestrated by the government or by Erdogan and his chief of staff and chief of intelligence service. He came onto TV around, I think, midnight something. He said that he couldn't contact with his chief of staff, the army, chief of the army, and his chief of intelligence agency. So, but he knew that it was this coup attempt was organized by, as he knew it, by the Gülen movement, or he called, he accused Fethullah Gülen, who lived in the United States. And around 1 o'clock in the morning, there was an arrest warrant for 2,745 judges and prosecutors had they put an arrest warrant there. I mean, there must be a magical prosecutor or person to find out that these judges and prosecutors in 3 or 4 hours was in this coup attempt. Obviously, they were profiled long ago before this coup attempt. And because of this profiling, they just arrest them, most of them. So when you realize that just after a few hours of this attempt, thousands of judges and prosecutors were arrested, or there were arrest warrant issued for them, then I don't think there would be any judge or prosecutor who could act impartially and independently when a case come before him or her. So this is the first big violation of the rule of law, and the Constitution states clearly that judges and prosecutors cannot be arrested only except these two conditions happens together. The first one is there must be a serious crime, and he must caught red-handed. But these judges still they are in prison after 3 years. There is not even one single case against them saying that they were involved in this coup attempt. What they have been charged, they affiliated to Gülen movement or associate, or they have social circles from these people or this movement. So this, after this coup attempt, 4,463 judges and prosecutors has been discharged from their duties. This is totally like 33% of the whole judiciary. And there were some brave judges. They decided like releasing some people who were arrested, and then just after 1 day of this decision, they were displaced or appointed to small town or ineffective courts. I know my twin brother is a lawyer. He witnessed a case, although he has no relation to the Gülen movement. He was arrested as well. He was in detention for a week because he was my brother. And now, after 2 years of trial, he was acquitted. But anyway, that affected him greatly in his life. He told me that a judge in the bench cried after he passed the sentence to his friend. They were working together, and he secretly told the other judge, his friend, saying, if I don't arrest you, they'll arrest me. So please forgive me. So this is the picture of judiciary in Turkey. But then, obviously, when they discharge this great number of judges and prosecutors, they recruited new ones. Maybe Mr. Dönmez knows better the numbers, but I wrote here. They recruited 5,000, almost 900 new judges and prosecutors, which is like 24% of the judiciary, 34% of the judiciary at the moment. And these judges are not more than 2 years of experience, and they are presiding the criminal courts. And they are passing sentences without any legal basis, because most of them are related to AKP, Erdogan's party. They were either lawyers of the party or in the party structure. They were like in the youth organization, or it's like now it's not a Turkey's judiciary, it's Erdogan's judiciary. So it is impossible to get a fair judgment from the courts. So there is no judiciary as a remedy in Turkey at the moment. So what can we do? Because there are, as my friend mentioned here, hundreds of thousands people discharged from their duties, and more than 500,000 people were charged for a terrorism crime, and they've been investigated. And maybe more than, I think 80,000 people were arrested, come and go. And now at the moment, more than 35,000 people are in prison. 17,000 of them are women, and unfortunately 864 babies have to stay in prison with their mothers. Although the Turkish law clearly states that if a suspect is pregnant or has a baby, under the, like his age is under 1 year old, they cannot be arrested. They should be immediately released. But unfortunately, even though there is a rule for this, now there are many pregnant women and mothers with babies in prison. So this is not about establishing a judgment or finding a justice. This is about a revenge. When it comes to revenge, obviously there is no rule of law, and none of the judiciary member can act even the existing law. And as you well know that during this emergency rule period, there were many governmental decrees which are against the constitutions, but constitutional law declared that they have no authority to inspect these laws. But that can be understood because even the two members of Constitutional Court were arrested during the night of the coup attempt. So when your friend on the bench was arrested, I don't think no one can be brave enough to say anything against Erdogan's judgment or Erdogan's decree. So there is a fear of this climate of fear in Turkey. Everyone is fearing. So what will happen next? But unfortunately, maybe one of the reasons for this, first I look in the domestic reasons, because then I'll come to international bodies. There is not a real opposition in Turkey. Because there was one, Selahattin Demirtas, and he is in prison now. Although there is a judgment from the Strasbourg European Court of Human Rights that he should immediately be released. But what they did after this judgment came, they pretend that they are going to release him, then they charge him with another crime and put him in prison. So they are just, Turkish government are playing with the international judiciary system as well. But when it comes to Strasbourg, European Court of Human Rights, they seem to fail to understand what happens or what's happening in Turkey now. Because they are, I am one of them, we applied to European Court of Human Rights, and they rejected our cases, saying that we should exhaust the domestic remedies. But I know very well that there are many cases, many judgments of the court saying that if there is no efficient domestic remedies, you don't need to exhaust that. But I don't know why. Well, maybe I know some of why. Maybe journalist friends can say this. As a lawyer, I should not say it, maybe. But they even suggested Erdogan government to establish a commission, inquiry commission. So then Turkish citizens won't be able to go to Strasbourg to apply for their cases, because they were scared that there will be thousands of cases piling in the court and they won't be able to cope with it. But obviously this is not a law, this is just a politics. And Turkish government, according to European Assembly's recommendation, established an inquiry commission. Then I applied there as well with more than 100,000 people. And I get a decision saying that, sorry, we can't restore you. Why? Because you committed a crime. What did I do? Two reasons. I put an official bank 300 euros. That's in my bank account balance, Bank Asya. And I donated to a helping organization called Kimse Yok Mu to help people in Africa. Just 50 euros. This is my crime. That's the reason why I've been discharged. And there is a case against me in the court in Turkey. Nothing more. These two things. I mean, this is not easy to comprehend for a person who was born in Sweden and live here, but this is the story of our lives in Turkey. Hundreds of thousands of people's story. And then when they come to Europe and saying that, no, there are, like, Ahmet Altan, the famous case, famous author, he's been in prison more than 2 years, I think, 3 years?
3 years.
3 years, and he was released last week. But he wrote another article talking about the situation in the prisons and his cellmate, and it was very popular. Then he was arrested 2 days ago again, which is not, you cannot do that because the High Court ordered his release, and then another court, lower court, arrested him. So there is no, I mean, as a lawyer, I can't explain, I can't understand how they operate anyway, because when we look at the cases, we should think in the frame of law. But when you don't have a law, you just have an order from the palace, presidential palace, or from the intelligence agency, then as a lawyer, you can't explain this. And I know that Judge, one very interesting case, the president of the court, the judge, was about to release some people. He went, I think it was in Nido or Nevşehir, I can't remember. He went and sat on the bench. He was going to announce his decision. Then the police came in and arrested the judge. Kırşehir. They arrested the judge on the bench when he was doing his duty. So this is interesting thing. When we talk about the rule of law, I'll come to it. There are core elements of the rule of law, like legality, including a transparent, accountable, and democratic process of enacting law. But as I say, there are laws, but nobody obeys it. Some people see themselves above the law. So there is no legality in Turkey at the moment. And says legal certainty. That means that the crime and punishment is defined in the law. So when you commit a crime, you know what will happen to you. But when I open an account in a bank, I didn't see any law against it. When there was no law against it, there is still no law against it. But I've been charged because of it. Donating a helping organization is not against the law, but after this July 15, then the president decided that this is a crime, although there is no law, and we've been charged because of this. So there is no legal certainty. You don't know what is a crime and what kind of evidence they'll put in front of the court saying that you are a terrorist. As if, like, whether it is that you sent your child to a school affiliated with the Gülen movement, or you are subscribed to a newspaper like Zaman, or you donated to a charity organization, we don't know. So there are, although there are 500,000 people were charged, but now still more than 100,000 people are waiting in fear without knowing that when they will be charged and on what ground. That's another thing, is legal certainty. And another element of the rule of law is prohibition of arbitrariness. And we all witnessed in Turkey that it's just Erdogan's word. He makes you one day a terrorist, another day he can release you when there is a pressure, like Pastor Brunson or Serkan Gölge was released because of the United States pressure. or some other people, or like Deniz Yücel, was a German journalist in Germany, Turkish origin. He was in prison, he was charged, he was convicted, but because of Merkel's pressure, he was released, and Germany took him with a private plane to Germany. But he was lucky because he has German government behind him. But these 17,000 women are not that lucky because there is nobody behind them supporting their cases. And access to justice before the independent and impartial courts is another core element of the rule of law. And also, when we try to find a lawyer to defend us, you can't find it because more than 600 lawyers were arrested because they defended these people, these victims. And now maybe more than 200 are still in prison. Some of them had to leave the country, some of them are hiding. There is no respect for human rights in Turkey. This is another core element. And also, the last but not the least core element of the rule of law is non-discrimination and equality before the law. But we see that law doesn't work same for everybody in Turkey. If you are accused by being a member of Gülen movement, there is a completely different law for you. If you are in prison, you are denied all your legal rights, and even judges admit that there are some articles in the criminal penal code, but they say we can't apply this to these people because we are afraid. So as you see, we talk about 6 core elements of rule of law, and none of them exist in Turkey. I don't have time, but I'll just I'll finish it. And unfortunately, these international bodies are not helping people in Turkey, victims in Turkey. As I stated last week in the German Parliament, there were people who were defending European membership and accepting European values, but now I told them, you failed us. I lost my faith in you. Because I am here, because why? I talk against Erdogan's radicalist policies. I defended universal values, and you left me alone. Okay, maybe I managed to come to Germany and you gave me asylum status, but what about my son? What about other people's son or children or wives? There are many people. I try to help people who came for asylum in Berlin. I interview them, each of them, to help them for their legal cases in front of immigration office, and I hear many sad stories. I know a lady, he came with a 9-year-old son to Berlin. His husband was a doctor, and he was killed in prison. He was a healthy person, he was a doctor, he was a healthy person. After 3 months, his dead body was given to her, and she lives in a refugee camp now in Berlin. So he's going to defend her rights. If it's not the European public or European courts or European Parliament, I think for now it's enough.
Thank you very much. It's a nice layout. It's not nice actually, it's a terrible picture, but you summarized very well. I thought we can, dig into deeper in the Q&A session. You used to give lectures on the human rights and constitutional law, and you became a victim of human rights.
I'll be a case.
You'll be one of the many thousands of the cases, of course, coming out of Turkey. The numbers are staggering, of course. I mean, when you say 32% of all the judiciary, judges and the prosecutors, the sheer number, like over 4,000 maybe doesn't ring a bell, but when you say 30% of entire judiciary overnight became a terrorist, and it goes without saying, of course, same happened in the foreign ministry. 30%, like 600 diplomats, high-ranking ambassadors, they were purged and they were declared, branded as terrorists overnight as well. That goes to the other professions, of course. That tells a lot, what kind of picture we are facing. And certainly there is no rule of law. It's a rogue nation. Operates on a political expediency. If somebody, standing behind the victims is a powerful figure like a Trump, the Chancellor Merkel, then they may go free, but others, keep languishing behind bars. You mentioned the mass media, of course, is absolutely critical. That's why Erdogan government went after the critical media first and foremost. I mean, we have a great journalist here, exiled journalist Ahmet, sitting in the front. I remember vividly, like happened yesterday.
I know. He asked the
raised
question.
very tough question right aftermath of the corruption scandal. That's a myth now. You cannot see it. I mean, yesterday, even the Trump was, making fun of this propagandist journalist we see in Turkey, embedded as a reporter to Erdogan entourage, and he was asking this lady, are you sure you're a journalist? You're working for the Turkish government, which is true. I mean, she's working for the Turkish intelligence agency. Let me start with my question first, and I'll open the floor to the audience. You briefly mentioned, you said the domestic remedies are no longer effective. It's completely collapsed, including the Constitutional Court. We saw 2 members of the Constitutional Court arrested without any due process, without any fair trial procedures, although there's a high threshold to detain and arrest and even try the member of the judiciary. But I remember, like, the United Nations judge, a sitting judge, who was overseeing a criminal case, a war crime in Africa, and he was also detained, arrested, tried. Despite the case was referred to the United Nations Security Council, the Erdogan government didn't budge in. But what can we do on the international level? You mentioned there's a political, motivation behind some of the cases in the European Court of Human Rights. There are United Nations mechanisms because of the commitment that Turkey has under different conventions. Are they, functioning to some degree as the victims who managed to go out of Turkey? Can we do something about here in Sweden, in Germany, and other places? Then I'll open the floor to the...
First of all, there are some cases in United Nations Human Rights Committee. They decided that there is no domestic remedy. So European Court should follow United Nations decision. But there are some bodies in United Nations related to human rights abuses, like charter bodies and treaty bodies. Obviously, treaty bodies are not, they don't have binding decisions, but charter bodies like the Human Rights Committee in Geneva and the Committee of Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the Committee Against Torture, and the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. These committees are effective committees. We should apply them, but there is one problem there, because you can't apply at the same time to Strasbourg and Geneva. So either you should apply to European Court of Human Rights or United Nations committees. And people, because European Court of Human Rights are more effective for the Turkish judiciary system, it's incorporated with the Turkish judiciary and the constitution. So what we try to do first to get some judgments from the Strasbourg instead of Geneva, because they are not obliged to legally fully to this committee decision. Obviously, the judge should take them into account, but this is different story. What can we do? And there is also another in my opinion, an effective thing, because as we know, especially Ahmet Dönmez and others know that, you know, there are torture cases in Turkey. So many people have been tortured, kidnapped, abducted by the military intelligence agency. After 6 months, they suddenly appeared in a police station, as if they came and turned themselves in. But they lost like 30 kilos, and they are afraid to talk. It's obvious that they've been tortured, and they were told that not to talk to anyone. And they were denied to access any lawyer, and the government has found lawyers for them. And obviously these lawyers are working with intelligence agency, so it's not. But there is a universal jurisdiction. I mean, it's like the idea that a national court may prosecute individuals for crimes against international law, such as against humanity, crimes like humanity, war crimes, genocide, and torture. So some of my friends applied to German courts for these torture cases. This is like, I know that 166 states has this legal arrangement. At least one of these 4 crimes, you can go to a national court and apply to it. I'm sure Sweden one of them. Well, we are talking about Turkey, so it's like crimes against humanity and torture. So if there are people who were tortured or who are relative to these people, they can go to a national court and apply them and give them the torturers' names or even the name of the government officials. So this is a pressure for them, because when you commit a crime, you think that it will never be discovered. But when they realize that this is all recorded, they hesitate to commit it again. So this is our duty who live in a free countries to do that. Come forward and open a case against these torturers, these human rights violators. Maybe it's a lengthy process, but even the news of these cases in Turkey will make a great effect. Because I know the dictators are cowards. They are not brave people. And when they talk, they don't care about anything. But I know from many dictators that they are afraid that one day they'll be tried in a criminal court or international court. So when we make their atrocities public and turn them into legal cases, they'll think twice before they act, I think. Also, this European Commission is another body, so people can apply to them, and we should first raise the public awareness of people in Europe, because, as I said, it's politics, but politics depend on public support. So when public start raising their voices against these human rights violations in Turkey, then politicians will have to take them into account, and they'll pressurize these international institutions, and they'll have to act. So that's our duty as well, and I know that SCF makes a great deal of this pressure.
Well, thank you very much for that. Is there any question that we can go into different angles, aspects?
So either everything is loud and clear, or nothing.
That is a terrible picture, and it's very difficult to digest. Of course. You said Human Rights Commissioner. You mean the Council of Europe Human Rights Commission, or the
United Nations?
United Nations, okay, in Geneva.
In Geneva, yeah. And there is a meeting December 12th there, because there is a human rights reviews in every 5 years for countries, and Turkey's time has come. I wrote a report. I've written one report. It's about the violation of the freedom of peaceful assembly in Turkey. And I'll go there in December, and I'll try to affect or talk to people and put some, say, some cases in their reports, because this is important. All the members of United Nations representatives join there, the meeting, and they ask questions about Turkey, and Turkish delegation try to defend it. But it's very important to put these violations in that report, or even make these representatives ask questions. Maybe you can do it for Sweden. Swedish representative can ask Turkish delegation about these women and babies in prison. What ground you arrested them? And you know, once they ask, I think, foreign minister or about journalists in prison, he said that as all the dictatorial regimes said, what do you think about the journalists? They are not journalists, they are terrorists. This is the case. I mean, they never accept that there are, or say, there are no babies in jail. So what are these? We know the names, we know the faces, but you know, they say these women are terrorists. Did they hold a gun? No. Did they kill anyone? What kind of terrorist organization is this? There is no gun at all. They've searched hundreds of thousands of houses, and they couldn't find even one single weapon. So but they found books, pen and pencils, maybe articles like Ahmet Dönmez, and these are actually more effective and dangerous weapons for the dictators than guns and rifles. So, and as I say, when you choose the path of authoritarianism or dictatorship, you became enemy of education. As Mr. Bozkurt mentioned, they closed down many media organizations, but let's not forget they closed down 17 universities in Turkey, and thousands of colleges, high schools, and they discharge 6,000 academicians from the universities. They can't find academicians to teach in the universities. There are some absurd cases, like in one university, a professor is a chancellor, dean, vice dean, head of department. As he holds 8 positions in his hands because there are no others. They discharge them.
Of course, I mean, we see kind of an enormous transformation. You know, crackdown on the press, freedom of assembly, fundamental rights is all part of the greater project of transforming Turkey as sort of a political Islamist, authoritarian, or even a dictatorial regime. And the free flow of information is absolutely terrifying this guy and his associates. That's why he came first after the critical, independent, or even the opposition media. Then came after major opposition groups, critical groups. Gülen movement is bearing the brunt of it, of course, but there are others, Kurdish political movement, like Demirtas you mentioned, used to be a leader of a predominantly Kurdish political party, a major opposition party.
Eren Erdem.
He's still in jail, and Eren Erdem and other opposition lawmakers. İlhan İşbilen used to be in the Erdogan's party. When he resigned, he found himself in prison. He's still in prison. So the crackdown is across the board, unfortunately, and they are very much afraid of free-speaking minds. So please.
Yes, I'm thinking a lot about the anti-terrorist laws that almost all countries have been established after 9/11. And I know I have lived in a country for 30 years that has gone, almost the same way as Turkey. so I know how the laws are used. Maybe it's not the what's happening in Turkey, because as you well have explained, there's no rule of law there. But I feel also that this fright of terrorism that is so great in the population and all the world, they're using that. So I don't know, should we think about more about this terrorist laws also? They are used so much for things that are not terrorism. So, well, I'm just thinking about this.
Yeah, well, you are right. I mean, the people who are in the government use this fear of terrorism to extend their power, as they did after 9/11, like in the United States or even in Great Britain. It happened like detention without a lawyer or etc. But even though when they arrest people, there is a charge based on the law. What I'm trying to say is, okay, wrong or right, but there is a legal document. I'm not saying that this legal document is right. I'm not defending them. But here there is an extreme case. They go against the law they made. That's what I am trying to say when it comes to rule of law. Because legality and legitimacy is a different things. If you have a legal act, then you may provide legality. But this legal act, if that has no legitimate base, then there is no legitimacy to act upon it. So what you say is like maybe the legitimacy problem, because it goes against the human rights or freedom of a person, like a private life, because they watch everything and they can with the cameras and so on.
No, what I want to say is that maybe we should try to explain better, to the population that this is not terrorism. You have to understand that they are using terrorist laws to make you feel that these people are dangerous, but they are not.
Yeah, that's true. They demonize people first.
Yes.
So this is like steps for genocide, as you know that. And Erdogan is a good student of German history, I think, because he's following Hitler's footsteps. And there is only one step left, which they will put us in some ovens and burn us. But he came to that stage as well, because last 2 weeks ago or something, he said that Turkish state will take every precaution to kill people who are acting against Turkish state abroad. So how can I feel safe even in Berlin when I speak against him? Because in his eyes, speaking against him is speaking against this Turkish state. I mean, speaking against Turkish state is not a crime in any universal legal establishment, but he can pay some people, and one day when I'm on the street or other journalists, then someone can put a bullet on my head. But there is a great saying that if we cannot be brave enough, at least like them, then we can't achieve anything. So, but this is, I think, European governments and also public should refuse to accept as a president of one legal state declared that he will kill his opponents abroad. So he abducted people from Moldova, Romania, Pakistan, Malaysia, which is against international law. So what happened? Nothing, just a weak condemnation, maybe small, and he knows that he can get away what he does, because he has one important card in his hands. This is Syrian refugees. So he threatened Europe, saying that if you don't accept my terms, I'll open the doors. Millions of refugees will come to Europe, and the governments are scared of Erdogan. And they just turn their eyes to these great violations.
Yeah, it's not just the refugees, by the way. Now he added a new card, Trump card. He said on Tuesday, publicly, the Turkish government are going to release the ISIS that were detained not only in Turkey but also in Syria. They actually pushed one to the Greek side as a Jordanian national, a 39-year-old man, but also American citizen. They couldn't put him on the plane because security checks in the Turkish airport by the American contracted company prevented that. So instead they push him to the land border on the Greek side. But the Greeks denied entry, of course. Now the guy is stuck for, this is 4 days now, in a no man's land between Greek and the Turkish side.
Yeah, well, I remember, you see, when your child is in a school and bullied by others, what do you tell him? Stand up for your rights, not to obey him and give your money to, pocket money to him. But what the Europe or international community does to this bully, just obey him. Instead of putting a stop and saying, no, you can't do this, you have no right. Because when you obey or when you just feel afraid that bully, he became more fearless and act without any rule. So that's happening now. So we should realize that he is not a normal statesman acting in a formality. He's like a thug or a mob leader. So if he realizes that he can get away what he does more.
Terrible.
It's terrible, but the point that you raise, the balance between the fundamental rights and the freedoms and the anti-terror laws, I mean, it's a common challenge in every country. But in Turkey, of course, is an extreme case. They don't really enforce their own laws. They violate their own constitution. They even make up an excuses and new charges that you cannot find in the books, like influence operation. What is that? Nothing in the books, in the legal codes that you can actually, match with that charge. But the prosecutor, they put in this sort of legal documents that you are doing this, influence operation. When we complain, for example, to the Professional Journalists Association about our colleagues back in Turkey, well, you're complaining about Turkey and this is a treachery.
What is he complained about Turkey when he was a victim of this maybe Kemalist pressure, or the former president's wife went to Strasbourg to defend her rights. When they applied, that was a normal thing, but when we applied, it's a treachery, as you say. This is absurd, but...
Well, the travesty of justice, of course, but yeah. Yeah, Eric, thanks.
I think you pointed out two ways of working against this situation, and to hope for EU is not possible. The EU has problems of their own. They had the Brexit thing, and the EU can't even say no to their own little Erdogans in Hungary and Poland. Yeah. They just sit and say, could you do? So the EU is not interested in helping the opposition in Turkey. But you were talking about this hearing in Geneva about the human rights in different countries, and evidently Turkey is up for debate now in December.
UPR, right? Periodic review.
Yeah.
Is for periodic review.
United Nations work very slowly and is not very efficient, but after all, it is important. These reports and these statements are important. They are taken into consideration. So it's very good that you go there and try to. Is there just one meeting, or or is it a process beginning, or are you in the middle of the process?
Began, but with the NGO representative, it's one meeting, and it's only 2 hours. Try our best.
But to go there and try to influence some key persons in the world and the other thing is that is possible is to use the national justice in different countries, like in Sweden. I know that I don't know of any torture cases that Swedish courts have taken into consideration, but there are people convicted in Sweden for war crimes or crimes against humanity in Rwanda.
Rwanda, I know that's the case.
Yeah.
Rwandan genocide.
Yeah, genocide, exactly. That ought to be possible to raise torture cases in Swedish courts in the same way. I don't know which court or how you apply it. Of course, you can find judicial help in Sweden too. If there is a case where there is binding evidence and so on. And I know in the Rwanda cases, Swedish lawyers went to Rwanda and had hearings there with witnesses and so on. They must be able to do the same thing in Turkey. But to hope for the goodwill inside Turkey now, it's, well, as you told us very clearly, it's a nation without legal possibilities now.
Well, I'll just give you the numbers for 2018. There were 149 named suspects in 15 countries regarding these national court cases. 17 accused on trial. 18% more named suspects than last year's, and 111 war crimes charged. There were 90 crimes against humanity, 15 genocide crime, and 42 torture cases. This happened in national court in 2018.
Yeah.
So this is one way.
Yeah. Were there any in Sweden? Do you have figures?
No, well, I checked only the prominent cases. There was a Spanish persecution and British. But I know there was one Rwandan case in Sweden.
I remember a while back the member of the parliament of the Kurdish origin here in Sweden, they filed a complaint against Erdogan on maybe genocide or the war crimes because of the crackdown on the Kurds in Turkey.
You're right.
I remember reading, but I don't know what happened with
No,
that.
I don't know.
With that case.
But that can be a possibility to apply to the politicians or the state governments. They are too afraid of what Turkey can do with ISIS terrorists or Syrian refugees or whatever. But the courts have a different agenda, or should have a different agenda, and don't take into consideration the national effects. They do a law job, so to say. So that's some way of raise opinion anyway.
We also need media support, of course, to put some pressure on the politicians. I remember very well a case from Switzerland. A Turkish government intelligence agent tried to kidnap a businessman who has been living there for 30 years, but very critical of Erdogan. Somehow they made a plan to kidnap this guy. 2 agents attached to the Turkish embassy in Switzerland, were plotting, and of course the investigators, they made a record of everything, the wiretaps, the video footages and everything, and eventually the case handed over to the prosecutor. But since this involved an intergovernmental matters that may pose a threat to commerce, finance relation as such, and Turkey is a big country, can do a lot, and the prosecutor was under pressure by the government not to go further. But the story broke into the Swiss media, and after the media covered that story, which is amazing story. Then the pressure on the government piled up, and the prosecutor had to issue arrest warrant against 2 Turkish diplomats. It's actually the agents of the Turkish intelligence agency working as a undercover as a diplomat. But they were facing an arrest warrant, so they had to flee Switzerland. So there are different pressure points that we can apply here and there from the
Media coverage is more important.
from the legislative side, from the media, and then the judiciary, of course.
Yeah, but to get that media attention, you need stories.
Yes, absolutely.
It must be a good story to tell, not only to interest one specific journalist, but to get him, give him or her the possibility to sell it to the desk at the media, saying this is a story we should work on and publish. So, case.
Absolutely.
And there must be awful cases.
Well, yesterday the Wall Street Journal published an amazing story on how the Turkish government has been profiling 71 people. These are U.S. citizens of Turkish origin, and some of them the legal residents. Maybe they don't have a nationality yet, but they hired a lobby firm in Washington D.C. to go after these 71 people affiliated with the Gulen movement. Since this happened in the U.S. soil, and when the report passed to the Turkish side, it became a part of the criminal evidence against these guys and their relatives, and they put them a lot of jeopardy. So as you said, it triggered interest from an American media outlet because it took place in the U.S. soil. So it was a great story to pitch, and they picked up on that, and they published yesterday when Erdogan was meeting with Trump. So you have to find very interesting stories that may be relevant to the national agenda. We did with the same with Norway, for example, when we found a document they were profiling the people in Norway, and the Norwegian media picked up on it as well. So there are different ways and means to trigger some interest.
Well, they profiling in everywhere. My son's principal, my son goes to school in Germany. His wife went to Turkey to visit her mother. She was sick, and she can't come back now. They confiscated her passport, saying that your husband is a threat to the Turkish state, so you can't go back. And my wife couldn't come leave the country for 3 years. She had to take the risk of death, and she passed through the Aegean Sea to the Greece illegally, then come to Germany and joined me. Many people like that. Why? Because I am speaking against him.
Well, you are
How is the Turkish embassy in Stockholm working? Are they profiling people around here?
Who?
The Turkish embassy here in Stockholm.
Yes,
do they
of
have
course.
people
Of course. I mean, we actually published a story, I don't know, 3-4 months ago. My name was mentioned in the document. Levent is here, and another colleague of ours that work in this small group, publishing stories. So they were actually communicating among themselves between the judiciary, justice ministry, interior ministry, intelligence agency, how we can make sure, to bring these guys back to Turkey. So yes, they have been profiling, they have been surveilling, people, especially critical journalists, who are speaking up, writing, and still, trying to keep their professional life intact. They don't like that. So the intimidation campaign is very much alive beyond the borders of Turkey. So they use different tactics. They threaten their relatives still back in Turkey. They seize their assets, homes and bank accounts, and some other measures they employ, unfortunately.
I hope it won't come to the stage like Putin's opponents found that in somewhere, like poisoned or something like that. But if they can do it, they will do it. They won't hesitate to do it.
Well, with that, let's wrap it up. Thank you very much. this
Thank you.
for the wonderful presentation, for interactive Q&A session. I think we got the picture.
I hope next time we'll talk about how Turkey got rid of the dictator and how we can re-establish or better establish rule of law. That's what I hope. Anyway, yes.
Well, it's an uphill battle. I think we were discussing with Eric before the panel, discussion started. I mean, it's very, peculiar times we are going through. Not only in Turkey, many other places. It's different things.
Authoritarianism is
Very
trend.
different,
Yeah.
Things are taking place. We don't know where the world is heading. Actually, I mean, even in Sweden, I don't know
want
what
to
might
add
happen
a
tomorrow.
last question about that. What can you do in other countries where we can see it in Sweden too? Authoritarianism is growing, and the Sweden Democrats who also studied Hitler's methods, how to break down a legal state. What can we do now here? Before, what could you have done in Turkey 15 years ago?
I mean, first of all, we should raise our voices without saying that this won't touch me. It's happening to this group
Oh, yeah.
or that groups. When
One
people,
day it will happen to all groups.
as you know, the Hitler story, they
Yeah.
said they came first for the Jew,
Yeah.
then for the gypsies,
Yeah.
and we never thought that they'll come for us.
No.
But when they came for us, it was too late to object. So I think to protest or to object on time without delaying and saying that it won't touch me, that's the most important thing.
I think we have to step up, as you mentioned before in our private chat. You are volunteering your time and your energy to stand up against racist, far right extremist movements here. I think more people needs to put their resources, energy, and time as a collective body, and take this issue very forcefully to the agenda, and confront these people.
We should realize that these authoritarian people came first for secluded communities, so they can sell these ideas. Then they extend it to other communities and the whole society later. So it's
we have
not
to-
their rights or his right violation. It's my rights being violated. When we can say that, then we may be able to stop it. Otherwise, and
So we have to fight for freedoms for all,
yeah,
Yeah.
not just for
not for just our neighbors or people think same with us.
So on that note, let me close it up. And thank you very much for coming here, making time from your own schedule. I hope you learned something new, and we'll take this
Maybe
with
not new, but
us.
we remembered them again.
Well, we have a roadmap, what we can do at the individual level, at the collective level, and hopefully we'll do something about it. So thank you very much, and have a great
Thank you.
day.